Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Let's Talk Success with PXP Endurance. I'm joined by my brilliant co-host, Paul Plummer.
Hello, everybody.
How's it going today?
It's going great.
How's your morning been?
Busy as always, right? We got a lot of things going on. Everything's from rehabs to personal trainings to people talking about what their fitness level should be and how they can achieve some goals.
Yeah, I understand that for sure. Anything good for breakfast?
Always. Usually a shake. Usually some
Gotcha. Protein shake?
It varies, yeah. Protein shakes. Just trying to get things.
What's your favorite flavor?
Strawberry. Yeah.
Okay. I like strawberry, but I always have a hit and miss with strawberry. It's like it gets old fast, I guess, for me. But I love it, but it's just like can't have too much of it.
That's when you throw in some chocolate.
Yeah, I know, but we'll figure it out. Do you have a favorite, have you made protein milkshakes or anything?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, those are good. I can teach you.
I like the pre-made stuff, the Fairlife and the Orgain.
Okay, I got you. Well, all good. So I have a joke to bring to you, and this is from Cricket, 5 p.m. class. Yeah, so she said this to me yesterday, so shout out to Cricket. I'm going to put you on here. She said, so it's a Halloween one. So why didn't the skeleton cross the road?
I don't know.
It had no guts.
Oh boy, that's Cricket.
Yep. So I thought it was good. It was It was my style. Yeah. It was definitely my style joke.
It's fantastic. Yeah,
for sure. Okay. So I know this has been on your mind quite a bit, and it's kind of your USP, I would say almost, is kind of your training structure. Our newsletter is out now, and so I think I put in there you have a unique recipe to success, right? And that's where this is very unique. Well, it was very unique to me, especially when I got started with you as an athlete, because one, I knew nothing, but two, it was just different from what I had experienced and what I saw online, even just because, I was training on my own a little bit before I got with you for Ironman. And it was definitely totally different from what I was doing. So today's topic, everyone, we're going to go over training philosophy or philosophies, and touch on just volume, experience, and some other areas that we want to go over and kind of show off what Paul knows in this area or what we may see online. So I guess to start us off, we'll go with volume. Okay.
Well, that's a lot of pressure. The way you just phrased that right there, trying to get all the answers. The first thing everybody needs to know is there is not a one way to do everything. Mm-hmm. Everybody is different. One of the pitfalls I see a lot of people doing is they go online and they watch what somebody else has done, and then they try to emulate that. And what they don't look at, or what they sometimes don't tell with what they're doing, is the injury history that's going on, or the amount of volume that they've been doing, how long they've been doing this, how long did they ramp up, to get to this spot to do that training program. There's a lot of variables that need to go into all those pieces. And if I look at my training philosophy, that's why PXP's your goals, your success is there, because we can talk about marathon training. Mm-hmm. And if I had 7 people that I'm training for marathon training, I have 7 different routes to get there. Each of those individuals come from a different background, different experience level, different injuries, different patterns, different work backgrounds, different things that set them up that if you follow the same recipe for each of them, it's only going to work for 1 or 2.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess when we talk about volume, I guess I don't want to, spill everything here, but how would you determine like volume for me, for instance, versus volume for, someone else, really? I mean, because there's people faster, there's people slower, there's people right at my speed, right? I guess in terms of volume for me, how would you base my volume?
Well, we've got to give a lot of background on that, right? Yeah. So, volume for you right now, man, you're 6 to 7 weeks away from another half Ironman, right? So your volume is different than if we were just getting started, like we were, several months ago. Mm-hmm. So if we back that up even more and look at what do we want to do in terms of volume, we look at several things. What's your injury pattern?
Yeah.
Have you been hurt recently? Are you able to be consistent in the training? You mentioned, as you talked about volume, you talked about intensity and speed and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'd throw that in the background. I mean, I'd initially trying to get people away from looking at how fast they are, or how powerful they are right now, if we're looking at volume. That'll come later.
And I guess, so why is that? And I'm asking because, so when I was training on my own, I was doing I guess probably what most people do. I was increasing distance and increasing speed, right? So I was looking
at the same time.
Correct, yep. Yeah. So I was looking at pace and I was looking at distance. And I think I know I downloaded a free training program. I won't tell the website, but I know I downloaded one from a resourceful website, or not resourceful, a credible website. And it was pretty much that. Well, I guess it didn't necessarily say the pacing because it didn't know me, right? But I just did the pacing myself because I wanted to improve, right? So it was like, let's start at 3 miles and we're going to work our way up to 13 or whatever it might be. And then at those times I would do, 4 miles at a 7:45 pace. And then I would say, okay, next time I want to do 5 miles at a 7:40, right? And then the next time 6 miles at a 7:35. And then go from there. And then that's when, when we first had our initial meeting, I said, I can run pretty much every other day. But my knees hurt, so I have to ice my knees like crazy after I run now. Whereas, before I started doing that, I really didn't have to, but I was only running 3 miles, so that was kind of like my excuse was that.
Some people think 3 miles is a long way.
Well, yeah, and it was for me, so that's why I'm bringing that up, because 3 miles for me was a ton, especially when I about died running at a 7-minute pace for my 1 mile gym test in high school, right? So so 3 miles was a lot, but then that's when I came to you and said, this is what's going on. What should I do, right? And that's pretty much where.
Yeah. Well, at this point, we got to get into energy systems, right? And because what you were just describing is the volume and the intensity.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you, to use your numbers, if you're running at 7:45 for 4 miles and then you jump to 7 miles and you try to do that faster, that's a great recipe for getting on my rehab table, because you are going to get hurt. I mean, that's just turning up the volume too quickly. You're ramping up your training volume and intensity too high. It's like the steepness of that incline, the steepness of that progression is too much for your body to sustain.
Okay.
Most people, when I start working with them, the first month, 6 weeks, I'm telling them to slow down. And it's not so much that I care about their pace. Slow down in terms of their expectation of where they should be, that comparison component.
Okay.
So let's talk about these energy systems. There's plenty of spaces out there you guys can go research, all the nuances if you're into looking at the specific numbers and all the chemical stuff going on. Great. I try to break that down into more practical terms. So there's 3 energy systems. One is the really fast, powerful energy system. It's like gasoline. You light a match, gasoline explodes, but it doesn't last very long. If you're going to go for a sprint, you're going to sprint for maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds at the most, and now you're going to start to slow down. You can't sustain that for very long. Then you've got one that's the anaerobic space there, where it goes a little longer than that. I use the analogy of kerosene there. It takes a little longer to light, and it burns a little slower, but it's going to burn out fairly quickly also. And it's, if you think about, 1 to 2 minutes in that range, that's usually that anaerobic space there. And then you've got the aerobic system, and I use oil as that analogy. It takes a long time to light it, but it burns nice and slow, and it'll just burn for days. It'll just keep burning if you stay at that relative intensity. Most people like to burn the gas and the kerosene because it looks cooler.
Right.
You get to show off your paces, your intensity, how powerful you are, but you don't really get to do it for very long. If I can get them to build a stronger foundation, which is the aerobic system, they can then build their body, build their fitness, build all those things as high as they want. If they don't build a strong foundation in that aerobic space, they don't really get to build very high, and that's when a lot of plateaus start happening and people get frustrated and it's just not a good place to be. So if we get those three energy systems under control, if we get an understanding of gas, kerosene, and oil, and we want to burn oil more so if we're doing something more than a few minutes, okay? Now, if you're going to go out and run a 5K, that's going to be your kerosene. You're going to push pretty hard. You're still going to get into your oil, later on down that, but you're not really going that long. You're going, depending how fast you are, some of these fast speed people are, 14, 15 minutes, and, we are in awe of those guys.
Right.
Most of us mortals, are that, 20 to 25 range, and then there's others that are out there much slower, but that's what they've got because that's what their bodies allow them to do. That intensity, that pace, at most we're talking about 30 minutes now.
Yeah.
And so on that aerobic system, there's not a whole lot of time to really get into the burning oil. The race isn't long enough. If we're doing something longer than a 5K, now we're really talking about we have to have a really strong foundation in that aerobic space, the oil.
I got you. And so, the first, I think this is probably going to be one of the most popular questions when people hear this, and when they not only hear this, but when they've come in here to see what your philosophies are and have heard about your philosophies is, the challenges that comes with that kind of, training philosophy, right? Because for me, it was a challenge for me too, right? Because when I got started. So I guess in terms of the challenges, like, how do you get someone to buy into what you're going to give them, right? Like, I don't know if you want to tell them necessarily exactly the way you do things or your training philosophy, but like, so for instance, the philosophy of just increasing distance over a period of time is one way someone might try to do something, right? So, I've heard of people running marathons where they just gradually increase distance per week and get into that. But I don't think, I know that's not your philosophy. Yeah. So what challenges have you seen with?
Yeah. Well, I think, the thing that I want to keep coming back to is there's not a one way of doing things. Everybody is different. And so the things that I do, they're not unique. These are things that if you look into the science of what people are taught how to do things, there's a lot of great coaches out there that have the similar knowledge and so forth. It's just applied a little differently. If I can get them to understand that they don't have to hurt all the time, they don't have to be exhausted and tired all the time, and they can see the performances going up, they are getting faster, they are able to do longer distances, everybody will jump on those pieces. And that's the key, is being able to show the history, show that, I've been with some of the individuals for almost a decade now, and they're still getting faster. They like to say that they're like a fine wine, they're getting better with age. Yeah. But some of it is getting that engine better tuned. The way to, I don't know if there's a way, again, I want to keep going back that there's not a way to do things, but one of the things that I do with people is simply explain this stuff to them. Yeah. If we can understand what the body needs, how the foundation is built, and I use a lot of different analogies. If we're going to build a building, you're going to build a house, you don't start with the walls. You start with that basement, you start with that foundation, you build it, make sure it's nice and sturdy and strong, and then you start adding on the other pieces that you want. And even once you've moved into that house, you still keep adding to it. You start painting the walls, you start tweaking this, you start tweaking that. That's the process of building your fitness. It's not hey, as soon as I finish this marathon, I'm going to be there. As soon as I finish this 5K, I'm going to be there. Now it's, okay, I'm building this structure, now I'm going to add these other pieces onto it. The biggest struggle that I see is there's what people read online. Right. They go online, they see stuff, that's what you did. There's a lot of good intending pieces out there, and that's the struggle. If we're going to try to show people a way, the easy way of doing it is try to find one that fits most of the people and say, here's what you got to do, and for most of the people it might work. It's not the best one for everybody. And a lot of people might get some benefit from it, but there's limitations to those things. Yeah. If you can do something that's tailored to you, that's geared toward your background, your injury patterns, your experience level, your goals, you can be successful.
Gotcha. And so you hit a couple points that I hear a lot or see a lot of. And so you said people running without pain, right? And that's a big
that can be done. Did
right?
You know that?
Well, it's funny because now that I'm with you, right? I tell people that and they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, so I'm like, yes, it's possible. You can run without pain because
it's expected. It's not the anomaly.
Right.
And that's the challenge. And I'm sorry about jumping on you there.
No, go ahead.
But the thing that I see this a lot, people come in, they've been running for a long period of time, they've gotten used to a certain level of discomfort, they've gotten a certain age, they've gotten a certain level, and they start self-negotiating.
Yep.
They say, well, if I'm going to do this, I've got to have this level of discomfort. And what's really happened is something's changed in their structure. They have an asymmetry going on someplace. Something's either too tight or not strong enough, or it's not activated. The motor firing sequence isn't working well. And so they've got a mechanical flaw in what they do. And so then that creates discomfort. And as they keep pushing into those places, it just happens. And then they self-negotiate. Well, it's not so bad that I can't take it. They hear the phrase, no pain, no gain. I am not a fan of that phrase. If you're in pain, you need to not do your activity.
Yeah.
Having soreness, on the other hand, if you get some soreness, great, you worked out a little bit. But that soreness should go away rather quickly before your next activity, before your next workout. Certainly shouldn't be lingering and having you elevate that level of soreness as you continue through things.
Gotcha. And so how are you overcoming that now? And just because, you're successful and whatnot, but I don't think people know you overcoming challenges, right? With people coming in as myself, just saying, this hurts, but I can run through it, right? For example, I just know a month or two ago, I heard a lady say that she has an issue going on with her foot, and she's training for a marathon, but she trains on her own, and she thinks she has plantar fasciitis, so she thinks, I'm just going to run through the pain. And this is nobody in here. Sure. But she says, what's running without pain? And I was like, well, I don't do it anymore. At least I'm not supposed to do it anymore sometimes, right? So, how are you overcoming that and being successful?
Yeah, a lot of it's just communication.
Yeah.
Some of our listeners are going to be listening to the story right now and having the same reaction that if I was talking to them one-on-one. They're going to be, are you sure? What about? And they have their doubts and their fears, and we can talk about it. I can share examples from others. We can chit-chat about those things. Most of the time, it's not about having a conversation of telling them what to do. It's showing them what to do. It's showing them how to move their body or showing them what their limitations are. And usually they already know it, but they're tucking it back. They're bearing it down and they're ignoring it. And show them that they can't stand on one foot.
Yeah.
If you can't stand on one foot and be balanced, how are you running?
Yeah.
Because you got this little wiggle going on from side to side in your hips. Every time you take a step, you've got this drop or you got this dip, you got this stress going on, usually down your IT band or in your back or in your foot or your knee or someplace, where if you get more stable, that tugging, those forces don't happen, the pain doesn't happen. Or at least it diminishes over a period of time, and ideally it gets down to that zero level. And as you're more stable, all the forces you put into the ground to propel your body that you're trying to increase your performance on, the power doesn't get lost side to side and actually gets to be used to propel you, and then you get to cover more ground.
So, and for this, I think I'd like for you to just say, for example, I don't know necessarily what you call it, but you always say it. You say, if I gain like half an inch per step, that thing. So I want you to say that so people can hear it, because I like it and I think it works.
Well, I appreciate you liking that analogy or that story. So if I've got somebody who's unstable, and we can make them more stable, whether that's getting their glutes to properly fire, getting the fire in the right sequence, getting them to use the glutes prior to their hamstring, getting them to stabilize with their core and have more power into the ground, any one of those things can increase your performance. When we're running, most of us take on average 1,000 steps per leg per mile. So 2,000 steps per mile. Depending on the length of your legs and all that kind of stuff and what your cadence is, that number varies. But for quick and easy math, let's just use 2,000 steps per mile. Which means my right leg is taking 1,000 steps, my left leg's taking 1,000 steps. If I can gain a little extra force, or I can let the force that I'm applying anyway push me further forward with each step, and I get it, and I gain a half an inch with each stride, because I'm able to push off a little harder, I'm able to have a net result from that push off that pushes me a little further, that extra half inch. I've now gained 500 inches per leg.
Okay.
Or 500 inches per leg, which then gives me 1,000 inches per mile. Divide that by 12 is 90-something feet.
Okay.
And so in that mile, I've now gained, everybody that was within 90 feet of me, I caught and passed by doing nothing more than being more stable, by being more efficient in how I'm moving. I haven't increased my pace, my cadence. I haven't done anything like that. I've just become more stable. So my risk of injury went down. My performance went up by those 90 feet. I'll take that every time.
Yeah.
Right? And so if my forces that I've got are just being wasted because I'm not stable, we solidify those forces. It gets to be actually used. You cover more ground with each step. That half inch per step adds up.
Yeah.
And that's 90 feet per mile.
Right.
Usually translates, depending on what somebody's pace is, that's 20 to 30 seconds per mile, depending on where they're at in fitness and training and what they're really doing. So just those few things, now I've made somebody 15 to 20 seconds faster per mile, and great.
Right. And the biggest thing that, just caught my attention is that you're saying per mile, right? If I could, I would love to take 15, 20, 30 seconds off my per mile pace, right? For sure, just by, especially if I don't have to try harder, because as people, that's just, I feel like if we don't have to try harder and we get more results, that's...
Well, you're trying the same. So everything that you were doing, that same intensity that you've built up into, and now you become more solid, doing the same things, not working harder, not increasing your cadence, not doing anything, just using what you're already doing more efficiently. I'll take that every time.
For sure. And so, I'm sure the people, I hope they're interested now in, okay, you're saying these things, but how do I do that? What do I do, right? So if I come to PXP, what do I do in order to be more efficient so that I can take 15 seconds off per mile, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
And so this is where it becomes more complex and applicable to each individual. Some people come in and they've got a previous injury that doesn't hurt anymore necessarily, but they've got a limitation because of it. And so if we can figure that piece out and get the body more efficient from that, this happens. Some people come in and their right leg and their left leg don't do the same thing. So they can stand on one leg and balance really well. They can't on the other side. Well, if we make that more symmetric, that's one way of doing it. If somebody's coming in and they just don't have the strength in the glutes, or the glutes don't fire, well, then we got to get those things to fire in the right sequence, in the right order, and with a certain level of intensity as it's going on. There's a lot of people who think they have a strong core. They've done some sit-ups, they've done some crunches, they've held a couple of planks, but there's a lot of nuance into those positionings of, are you really using the abs to stabilize?
Okay.
Hip flexors like to take over, lower abs don't like to work. There's a lot of stuff that gets substituted, and you can get the resultant action without having the muscles actually fire and work. And so that's the first place to start is, are you symmetric in your stability and your balance? Can you get the muscles to activate? Are they activating in the right sequence, in the right order?
Okay. So basically I should come talk to you and see what I should do.
Everybody's different. Yeah.
Right. Because I want to give all the listeners something tangible to do so that they could, get better if they want to, right? Reach their goals.
There's several things they can try to do, right? They can try all those things I just mentioned. See where you're at on that.
Yeah.
Can you really feel your lower ab working? And I get a lot of people who like raise an eyebrow when I ask them that question. They're kind of looking around and they're trying to decide whether their lower abs are working or not. It's a yes or no question. Yeah, it's either working or it's not. You're either feeling it active or it's not. Same thing with your glutes. I mean, if you're trying to figure out if your glutes are working, you can't feel anything working back there. They're not working.
Yeah.
If you go to stand on one leg and you are more balanced on one side than the other, it's pretty glaring on those pieces. And sometimes, you can look up things online and say, how do I activate my lower abs? And you can try those things. And for some people, that might work. Right. A lot of us, we need to be shown how to do that. We need to be taught how to make those things work and rebuilt or built the first time, depending on where they're at.
Yeah. And no, I think just from personal experience, obviously, well, I think you do a great job of that, right? Just in here with the strength classes. Because, another, I guess, I don't want to say something that we might think we do right, but we do it wrong, is like that plank, right? When you first taught me how to actually plank, I was like, I don't know what this is. So,
I'm good. I got a big saggy back. I can do this.
Right. Well, I mean, and I hated planking too coming in, right? Because when I played football, we had, 2-a-day workouts and off-season workouts. Whenever they said drop down to get in a plank, it was the worst time of my life.
It was just miserable.
Right. And then now, just I don't know, in the last week or two when we've done 5-minute planks and whatnot, I'll think to myself when I'm in the plank, I was like, man, a minute used to be hard, right? So it's just crazy how that works. So I just really think, the strength classes are good. What if someone says, okay, Paul, I understand, like, I can go out here, and right now if I wanted to, I could go run. I could see if this is working and this is working, and I think it is, and it always is. Is there, like, can you watch me run? Do you offer anything like that where...
There's a lot of things. Like if I'm out running and I'm trying to figure out if I'm moving well, I've got enough experience that I can feel some nuances in my body. Someone who's less experienced needs somebody looking at them from the outside. You can do this on your own if you got a phone or a camera and kind of video yourself on a treadmill from the backside, and you're watching your foot move, and you're watching if you got any hip drop. You're watching from the perpendicular side and seeing if you're bouncing up and down, looking for any sort of asymmetrical movement or any excess motion that's not really helping propel you forward. You can do that on your own and look at some of those things. If you're not used to seeing some things, a lot of things are really subtle. Okay. So we do gait analysis here where we get you on the treadmill, we can watch you moving. I've had some people come in and looking for a gait analysis, and I start with just watching them move on the floor, and I'm like, I can put you on the treadmill, I can watch you move, and I'm going to tell you that you don't run very well and that you're not very efficient, but there's not a whole lot you can do about it. And then I show them that their glutes not working, they're not very stable, and I can simply tell them what they're not good at, but they can't fix it until they get those basic things moving.
I got you. Okay. So I guess, now I want to talk about the intensity of it. So you said, when I was running, I was increasing speed, which increases, intensity. Why shouldn't I do that? Because you said the gas, right? It's not sustainable.
Yeah, because you're using gas, and you have a limited supply of gas.
Gotcha. And so what's your way of not doing that and doing things your way?
Well, I don't want to call it my way. There's a lot of people that have come before me that use heart rate training. I use heart rate training. There's a lot of science out there on it. There are a lot of analogies that talk about heart rate training. The thing that I do is I try to explain it differently, more practically, get people to really understand what they're doing. When you start doing heart rate training and I give them their zones to stay in, that they come back and go, well, I'm going to have to walk to keep my heart rate in that intensity. I go, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know all about it.
Because your engine is working at a certain intensity, and it needs to get used to working at that intensity. And that's where I tell people, forget about pace, forget about all those pieces, go out and do whatever activity with your heart rate in this zone. And if you have to start crawling to kind of move it down and get the heart rate down, then crawl, and crawl becomes your activity, and we'll build you from there. Yeah. If you're able to jog or able to be at a nice pace that you can be proud of, awesome, great job. This process takes many weeks. And I usually tell people 6 to 8 just because that's about all they want to grab onto. They can give me 6 weeks of things. Okay, I've only got to endure this for 6 weeks. It really takes a little longer than that.
Gotcha.
It's really going to take that 8 to 12 weeks to get the engine tuned. And as soon as you start doing something that's not aerobic based, that's you start doing the cool, sexy stuff. You try to get, show off your speed and that kind of stuff. You kind of hinder that tuning of the engine. And so we're talking about 2 months of zone 2 activity of I'm going to call it long and slow. It doesn't have to be slow. I don't care about the pace, but at that intensity, whatever your heart rate zone would be, do all the activities in that zone. And eventually, what you'll find is you're doing the same intensity on your heart rate, but your pacing becomes a little bit more attractive to you. How it feels becomes easier, more sustainable, and you'll just gradually see that same effort level, that same intensity, where you get to go back to the paces or get closer to the paces that you would love to run.
Right.
And then once we've got that foundation set, then we start working on the intervals of speed, the intervals of that anaerobic space, and putting all the fitness stuff together to build or make that nice fitness house.
Gotcha. And how hard is that to get people to do that? Because it must be extremely hard, because obviously I had to do it, and I know how hard it was for me. But just coming from your perspective, because obviously you deal with a lot more people than just me, so
it's very challenging. And the challenging part comes from, it's easy to explain.
Right.
It's easy to, from a logical perspective, talk to people about what it's going to look like. Mm-hmm. The problem is, or the challenge is, they do it once or twice, and then they feel less than.
Yeah.
They oh my gosh, I'm so slow. Oh my gosh, and they start having all these pieces. So that it becomes the mental approach to it. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think I do people a good service of being able to give them the tools, help support them in those places where they're not feeling great about what they're doing, and keep reminding them of why they're doing it. And there's enough other people within the group that have been there that when we get the rookies started, or the new individuals that come in, and we usually have a mentor or somebody that we say, hey, do you remember when you were doing your Zone 2 training? And right. Having the stories come out, and people support them and say, it's going to be okay. I know it feels, and they'll fill in the blank there because it feels different to everybody. Mm-hmm. I know it's frustrating. I know and whatever adjectives comes into that space, just hang in there. Yeah. And usually about that 6 to 8 week place, and about the 6th week place, they come in and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this any longer. And I'm, get them to do it just a little bit longer. And about the 8 week mark, they come in and they have a different perspective. Hey, guess what? I went out today and my heart rate didn't get above this level. I had to work really hard to get it to even go up to that Zone 2 space. Mm-hmm. And did you see my pace? Yeah. And it's almost like a little switch got flipped, mm-hmm. and things start to happen. When that happens, all the magic gets to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think it's I think I know the answer, but do you think it's more mental or physical at that point, the battle, probably?
I don't know if it's more of anything, but the mental part is always a big challenge for all of us, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So the physical training that we're talking about, how long do you run, what intensity you run, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
That's the easy part. It's having somebody come in and simply follow a training plan, or buy one offline, or get a free one offline. Mm-hmm. That's the easy part. Having somebody come up with a system, a schedule of how to increase intensity, duration, that's easy. Mm-hmm. Being able to have the mental approach, be able to be disciplined enough to follow it the right way, to stay in the right zones, to do the right pieces, to read your body and say, hey, I know I'm supposed to do X today, but I just don't feel whatever it is. I feel tired. I feel this discomfort. Something's tighter than normal, and be able to deviate from it for a good reason. Mm-hmm. You're reading your body, and your body's saying, hey, you need a break. Yeah. Most of us look at it and go, oh, I'm tired. I'm not that tired. Let me get through. And when you do that repeatedly over and over again, that's a recipe for having an injury.
I got you. Okay. So there's not a generic formula to follow, really.
I'm sure there's some out there. It's just not here at PXP Endurance.
I got you. So with the heart rate training, I guess, you want to explain that to people? Or
we don't have enough time to really explain it. But you've got to get that aerobic base set. Yeah. Your engine has to be able to work at a certain intensity. And when I'm talking about the engine, I'm talking about your heart and lungs. Mm-hmm. That fitness place. You've got to be able to have a heart rate that can sustain pumping enough blood to circulate the oxygen to your muscles. And when your heart rate is really high, it's pumping really fast, and because your system's not as efficient. Whether that's you're not getting enough oxygen in your lungs, or whether you're not transporting enough oxygen, or it's not being absorbed into the muscles and in the tissues well enough. Whatever that culprit is, you've got to get all that working well. Once that system's under control, your heart rate can drop because you don't need to circulate as much blood because your body is absorbing the oxygen that it needs for that same intensity. Okay,
gotcha. And so with that, I want to go into what we put on the newsletter with, if people are running 10 miles per day training for a marathon, right?
Good for them.
Yeah. So I guess based on that, like if I'm doing, because I've heard of people doing this, just talking amongst runners, if I'm doing 70 miles in a week, mm-hmm. right, to train for a marathon, why not? So I guess is my question for you.
It's some people thrive on that volume. They thrive on that opportunity. Let's do some quick math, right? If we're running 70 miles a week, that means 7 days, we're running at least 10 miles. Now, for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, you do that for a sustained period of time, you're going to break down. Okay? Now, okay, Paul, we're going to throw some rest days in there. Okay, so let's run 6 days and have the 7th day is complete rest. Okay?
Yeah.
That means we're running closer to 12 miles a day. Okay? Same concept. But Paul, I'm going to have a recovery run in there. So I'm going to have 2 or 3 15-mile runs, and then I'm going to have some smaller distance there, just recoveries. I'm only going to run a 5K or 5 miles. I'm going to argue that there's no such thing as a recovery run. If you're running, you're running. If you're running slower, your mechanics have most likely changed, which means you're bouncing, you're got a bigger vertical oscillation. That's more stressful on your body than actually running well.
Okay.
And so the volume, some people can tolerate it. Some people have got a history where they've built up their stamina, their consistency to be able to tolerate 70 miles. Great for them. I would question whether there's very many people who can actually do that, sustain that. I see a lot of people talk about, hey, I'm training for a marathon, and then they talk about how fatigued they are, how sore they are. They go online and they hear the marathon fatigue that they're supposed to have, that the level of discomfort that they're supposed to have, and if you're tough enough, you can do this. And I have a different philosophy. I don't want to say that their way of doing it is wrong or improper. It's not. It's working for several people. I would suggest that most people can't tolerate that kind of work. So we've got several that have Boston qualified that have. Some of those that qualified it was their first marathon. Great for them.
Yeah,
we've got awesome. Some that it was their second or third marathon. Great for them. I had one individual who was self-coached, ran a marathon, a great time. It was a 3:30, 3:20 something pace. Fantastic. Wasn't Boston qualifying time for him. He had some discomfort. He had some fatigue level that he didn't think was appropriate, and so we started a conversation. And when I first met him, he told me what his marathon time was, and I'm like, "What do you want me to do for you?"
Yeah,
that's pretty fast.
Right.
And so the more we talked, I'm like, "Okay, well, I see some low-hanging fruit. Let's see." And so we tuned the engine, and the next year we did the same duration for his training. It was a 4-month block, basically. He had a base built going into that. We did 300 miles less than what he did the year before.
How many?
300.
Okay.
300 miles less than
I just wanted them to hear that.
Okay. He ran less frequently than he did before. We had him running, I think the max I had him running in a week was 3 times a week. We did some cross training. He had some bike and some swimming in there. I am a triathlon guy, so cross training is important. He was doing 3 days of strength work. I'm not sure how many times the traditional marathoners are like, why are you doing all the strength work? Marathon runners can't have muscle. And he's telling me what he's hearing from other people. I'm like, well, just hang in there. We can show them those things.
Yeah.
The marathon comes around, and he had a almost 20-minute PR.
Yeah.
He ended up being just a little over a 3-hour finisher. Boston qualified. And then he started doing all the math and looking back at what he did, and he starts telling stories about how easy it felt, how he didn't feel the same level of fatigue. After we do a marathon, I try to get people to take at least a couple weeks down, recover, that kind of stuff. He's chomping at the bit. He wanted to do longer distance triathlons and get into that side of the world and so forth. And I'm pulling his reins back, going no.
Right.
And I end up pushing him into 3 weeks of lighter stuff before we put any intensity onto things again. And it's that type of story that once they've gone through it, if we would have went to him when he first started hearing what I was going to do to him, and without a little bit more history inside that, he'd been shaking his head, no, I can't do this because I only did this time with this volume. I need more volume. I need more intensity. And that's what people think. It's not about more. It's about quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love about this entire place, because just outside of here, that's what, kind of my philosophy is on other things at work or, just life in general, quality over quantity with that. I love everything you just said with the individual that you use, because, like you said, afterwards, it was almost easy to do that, right? Now, it wasn't easy, obviously, and there was challenges, but it was easier than before. And he didn't have that same fatigue, and got better, went faster, right? And it was already a fast individual, which is insane because, in my opinion, it's always hard to get someone that's really fast to be faster, right? Like, it's easy to get someone to go from a slow, what might be considered a slow pace, right, to a faster pace. But when you work with someone really fast, it's hard to get that individual to go faster, which is awesome because, you said about 20 minutes off that marathon.
And that's one of the traps we fall into, right? I mean, if we look at somebody's pace and then we start comparing, that's the first place. If we look at another thing that, we've got to do on this stuff is stop the comparison.
Yeah.
Because it's all about you, right? If you and I, when we got started, if I'd start telling you stories about somebody prior to you and what they did, you're like, okay, that's cool, but what about me?
Yeah.
And I try to meet everybody where they're at. I don't care what their paces are. I don't care what their intensities are. I don't care what their experience level is. All those things are just details.
Yeah.
Meet you where you're at. Figure out what's going on, what your efficiency or inefficiency is. Teach you the right methodology, so to speak. Volume, consistency, intensity, and then just let it happen.
Right, for sure. And then I think, didn't he do a half Ironman like a month later or less or something?
I think it was 5, maybe 6 weeks.
6 weeks? Okay. Yeah. So, which is pretty cool just because you're not supposed to necessarily, because I think I've read online that you should, after a marathon, you should take so much downtime, right, and whatnot. But that's pretty awesome just hearing that story.
Yeah, and recovery and downtime, I mean, that's I would give with the same argument, right?
Right.
Everybody looks at that recovery or downtime and like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. Oh my gosh, this is so hard because I'm not doing something. And I tell them to rest with intensity. Have the same focus in their recovery as that they do in their training.
Yep.
Be deliberate. Be intentional about your training. Be deliberate. Be intentional about your recovery.
Yeah. No, that was just to give insight from me. That was huge when you told me that. Just because, like I took it. For me, I took it as a challenge, right? Yeah. Because I love challenges.
You went what? Rest?
Right. So it's like, and I'll try to. I tell people that talk to me and whatnot. And so, I mean, that really changed for me because then I was like, okay, well, if he wants me to recover as much as I train, then I'm going to go at this thing all day, right? So that's where, I started stretching like crazy. I started doing all these other recovery pieces with, whether that be cryotherapy and infrared sauna, massage guns and the recovery boots that we have here, right? So that's just where I think...
yeah, and those things don't need to be done just while you're recovering. They can be done while you're in your training to help maintain your fitness, help make sure things are working the way they need to.
Yeah, which is what I tell people is what I do. I was like, I have my sauce that I use from you, right? Because I get all my training from you and whatnot, and I do that. But I'm like, I do it this way because then if I recover as hard as he wants me to recover, then I can do more and whatnot, right? So that's just where I think it's fun to see that. And, very critical from what you said, recover with that same intensity.
Yeah. And you just hit on something that, I don't want to gloss over because it's really important of what you just said. I'm going to give you guidelines. And if I'm coaching somebody, if I'm working with somebody, I'm not a dictator. I don't want to tell you what to do and have you be a robot.
Right.
I want to give you these guidelines. I want to give you this structure. I can't feel what your body feels like. I'm trying to describe what good and bad or indifferent things are. Then you've got to make those decisions in that time period of, should you go out and do this run?
Yeah.
You're in a run and, it's scheduled for a 7-mile run. And at mile 4, you feel some discomfort that you haven't felt before. Should you finish?
No.
Well, sometimes, maybe.
Yeah.
Depending on what it is, maybe it's really not anything negative. It's something's just not feeling right, and you can get through that and be safe. It's just one day. If you've got an intensity to that or it throws off your mechanics, definitely don't walk back. Call Uber, wherever you're at. You got your phone with you, get a ride back.
Yep.
You don't have to finish every run if you've got something going on. And I use the term smart jocks. I don't want you just being a robot and doing something just because it's on your schedule. Don't just check the list. Think about what you're doing. That's where we go back to the intentionality. of those pieces, and I want you to be able to internalize it, apply it to you. I want to help teach you how to apply that to you. When we do that, when we have that partnership, things work really well.
Yep, absolutely. I think, and you just reminded me of that, just because I've done it a couple times where I found out the hard way if I should continue to run or not. I think that's the real walk of shame. I think that should be the real walk of shame for that, because that's like the worst walk in the world. When you go out, like literally when you go out and run 4 miles and you have to walk those miles back, it's, oh my gosh, I dread it so much because I've done it.
It is
right? Because
I think I would hope that we've all done it, because that means we're making good decisions in that moment.
Yeah. So it teaches you. They definitely teach, especially if you're like me and you don't carry your phone on you, or you don't have the smartwatch like enabled or whatnot, because mine doesn't make phone calls and texts for some reason. And I don't carry my phone on me typically either when I run. So it's like, well, this 4 mile walk is about to be forever.
Yeah. And some people aren't, I'm going to call it disciplined enough to do that. They're
right.
like, I got to get back. I don't want to be out here all day. I don't want to walk all the way back and take this amount of time. And so they push themselves into that to jog back, even though they're uncomfortable, they're in pain. And that's just making it worse.
Yep. No, it's true, because I've tried, right? Because
I know.
on my walk to shame, I'm like, well, I got to get back. So I'll start to go again. I'm like, oh, nope, I can't, because it just hurts so bad, Yeah. So that's the walk of shame for me. But you mentioned another piece in there when you were talking about the individual that Boston qualified. You said cross-training. And obviously, like you mentioned, you do triathlon and I do triathlon. What do you think about cross-training?
Yeah. Well, cross-training is great, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a point real quick. I don't try to convert everybody into triathletes.
Yeah.
Okay? There are a lot of people who come in who didn't have triathlon as their goal and so forth, and now they are doing different distance triathlons. Because they didn't believe they could before.
Yeah.
Or so forth. So as we start talking about cross-training, I just want to make sure that everybody understands that I don't try to create triathletes just because. Okay, it's not a requirement. The cross-training, however, is very important. If your body does one thing day after day after day, and that's all it sees, it'll adapt to that stress. If I'm an assembly line worker and I use my right arm to do the same thing over a period of time, that right arm is going to get damaged in some sort of tendinitis or some sort of ache and pain and so forth. If that person uses the right arm and left arm and they move across the line or they do something different, that's not as likely to happen because they get built-in rest, they're using their body differently. The same thing with running. If you're just running, you're going to get some patterns that develop. If you have some cross-training, whether that's yoga, whether that's a flexibility and maintenance piece, whether that's strength training, whether that's biking, rowing, swimming, the list is endless. You can get your fitness level up because as long as your engine, your heart rate and lungs are working at a certain intensity, it doesn't really matter what the mode is.
Okay.
Now, if you want to be a runner, you need to run, right? You can't do all rowing.
Right.
Get your fitness level up and then go out and run and not expect that to not be perfect. So there needs to be a balance in there. There needs to be a way to push the fitness level up without creating those asymmetries, without creating those patterns that happen. And cross-training does a really good job of minimizing those.
Okay. What's your favorite form of cross-training, just for you? Not like as a general for the public.
I don't know. I mean, I like swimming and biking and strength training. So for me, that just fits in. If I'm going to pick one of those, I like cycling better than swimming.
Okay.
Mainly because I'm better at it, and that's what we all do, right? The activities that we like are usually the ones that we're better at.
Yeah.
And and I'm going to give people something else to grab onto. If there's something in the strength arena that you don't like, maybe it's that plank.
Yeah.
Maybe it's getting those lower abs to fire. Maybe it's that balance work. Maybe whatever it is. It usually means that you're not very good at it. And those are the places that I would tell you to pay your attention. For example, when you go stretching, if you go to grab, every time you go stretching, you do the same 3 stretches right away, you're already really good at those.
Yeah.
Pick something different. Pick the ones that you don't like. Pick the ones that you're not good at.
Okay, good. Well, going on from there, I guess, do you have anything you want to go over with the training philosophies and whatnot?
Yeah, I think, in general, I think if you're looking at your event that you're training for, there needs to be some sort of reason for the distances, the volume, and the intensity that you're doing, right? So if I'm training for a 5K, my 5K, I'm going to go out and run it in about 23 minutes. Okay, so my performance duration is going to be, let's call it 25 minutes just for easier math. Okay, so what should be my longest run if I'm only going to run 25 minutes on a performance day?
Yeah,
I don't know. There's a lot of different formulas out there and so forth. Mine would be I just need to double that. So I would use an hour. And so, because I would want to push that limit a little bit.
Okay.
So my long run and my aerobic run, I'd want to be able to do an hour run of some sort, whatever intensity, to be able to have enough aerobic capacity to perform for a 5K. It would grow the longer the performance is, right? So if I'm doing a 10K, I'm not going to run 2 hours, right? That would be too high on that. But I might want to be able to run an hour 15, an hour 30, depending on what that long run is. And that's not every week. That would be a build up over a period of time to be able to get to that space. I'd want to spend a lot more time, about half that distance of more power stuff, once we get into the pieces. So for example, if I'm going to be jogging or doing an aerobic run, and my aerobic pace with my heart rate in a certain area is 9 minutes, well, that's what I do my hour in.
Yeah.
Okay. The more intense stuff, I might be running at 8:15. I might be running at 8 minutes. I might be running a little faster. I'd love to be running a little faster for shorter distances. So maybe I'm doing mile repeats. Maybe I'm doing 2 mile repeats. Maybe I'm doing whatever that space is to work on my leg turnover, to work on that anaerobic system. Maybe I'm doing speed work, 100s, 200s, 400s, all the way up to 800s for a 10K or a 5K. My speed work for a half marathon or a marathon, I'm not going to do as much 400 repeats.
Right, yeah.
I'm going to do more mile repeats, 2 mile repeats. If I'm doing marathons, I'm going to do more 5K repeats, right? That smaller duration that we're looking at somebody's goal, that becomes now a repeatable place the longer the distance is.
Gotcha.
I'm not one that buys into, if I'm running a marathon, that I need to get myself into the 50 to 70 to 100 mile weeks. As we've talked earlier, just about sustainability.
Right.
And I really wouldn't, if I'm running a 10K, get into much more than a 6, 7, maybe an 8 mile long run. And that would be my long run. And I'd be building up to that space. And so everything's relative on that. And as you get into the tri world and you start looking at that, now you've got, Olympic distance, you're looking at a 2.5 to 3 hour duration. So you've got, 3 sports that you're trying to manage inside of that space, and you put bricks together and get into half iron, full irons. Now you've got everything from 5, 6, 7 hour half marathons to 10, 11, 12 and longer durations out there. So you've got to get the body prepared to be able to do longer stuff based on what it is. And so if I've got somebody training for a full iron where they've got a marathon at the end of that, I still don't have them running high volume stuff because I just got to get the engine tuned relative to all those pieces.
Okay.
They might have several hours of activity, but they're not putting in the same pounding.
I got you. And that's kind of what I want to ask now is that, so if I am going off of your 5K example, if I am doing a 5K, you said, I might do, a little over, I might do an hour and 15 running, right? But how
that would be the 10K, up to an hour 15. It'd be an hour.
Oh yeah,
for the
5K is an hour. Yep. How often would I be doing that?
That would be your long run for the week.
Right. And so I meant, what other runs would I have that week?
You need to work on the gas, which would be that speed work. So your things that are, 1-2 minutes. Sometimes it's a little shorter speed work. On a 5K, you don't have the same speed work if you're going something that's an hour and a half or longer.
Right.
So you got to get that energy system. You got to get the gas energy system working. You need the kerosene energy system working, and then the oil is what we were just talking about with that long run.
So am I working that gas 5 days a week then?
If you are, please take one of my rehab cards. I'll see you here in a couple of weeks.
Right.
Yeah, and no, the answer is no.
Okay.
If you're doing that high intensity stuff, maybe once a week, maybe once every other week, depending on your experience level.
Mm-hmm.
The kerosene system, you can hit that once a week.
Okay.
Because it's not quite as intense. And you can hit the long run once a week. And that's where if I'm training somebody on their runs, 2 to 3 runs a week is what we use. Now, as most of you heard that, some of other individuals are going to go, they just stop listening.
Yeah.
Because they heard 2 runs a week.
Yeah,
I can't increase my performance on 2 runs a week. It's not the only fitness thing that you're doing. That's where the other cross training comes in. That's where the other pieces happen. You're just not destroying your body,
right,
as much.
Yeah, but no, and I just wanted them to hear that again, just because I think it's very important for people to hear it, especially because I've had people come up to me and ask me, how do I get faster? What are you doing, right? And I'm like, well, I'm only doing this and this. They're like, what? I'm running every day. I'm not. Yeah. Right.
And I see that a lot. People that have started to plateau, that's usually the first thing. I can almost tell you verbatim what our conversation is going to be. Mm-hmm. I started asking them what they've been doing. They're like, well, I'm running and I'm really working hard and I'm doing this consistently. I'm running 5 days a week. I'm running 6 days a week. I'm running 7 days a week, and I just can't get any faster. Mm-hmm. And then when I can really get them to look inside and talk about how tired they are, what their fatigue level is like, it's really high.
Yeah.
And they don't have enough recovery, and they just can't work.
Right. No, yeah. And once again, I just wanted people to hear that they don't have to hurt and they don't have to do so much to accomplish whatever it is they want to accomplish, right? So
it's counterintuitive. I don't know how many of you all, when I first start talking to you, you give me the look, and you're looking at me with those eyes, and then you're kind of going, okay, well, he's supposed to know what he's talking about. Well, I know there's other people who have done successful things. I don't think that's going to work for me. And then I've been fortunate where many of you have just continued and had faith and listened to it. And then you get into it, and we get to that event. You do what you do.
Yeah.
You smile when you cross that finish line, and then you look back and you're like, wow, I didn't realize how much I was, and all the words come in there. Whether it's, I don't like to use the word overtraining because it's a misused word. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have to work so hard. I didn't need to be as tired as what I was. I didn't need to have all my focus in this area. And it's counterintuitive to do less and go faster.
Mm-hmm. Which is just so nice, just coming from my perspective. It's, super nice to not have to run every day, honestly, right?
Well, some people love to run every day.
Well, I know, and I know some people do, and that's great, but it's not my thing, right? Yeah. So, coming in, I would have thought to train for a half Ironman or even a half marathon, because I've done a couple of those now, that I was going to be running all the time, right? And to not have to do that,
well, most of the training plans out there, yeah, most of the training plans out there have you running 5 to 7 days a week, and a rest day here and a rest day there, and they'll talk about cross training, and
right, and that's
it's worked for several.
Yeah, and that's what I was doing. Like I said before I came in, I was running every other day for sure, and every other day when I shouldn't have been, right, with my knees being the way they were, and so I was just doing too much. But you get on all that?
Yeah. So I just want to make sure that I summarize that really well. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't run more than 2 or 3 times a week.
Right.
Some people who have built up the consistency, who aren't hurting, who have good mechanics, enjoy that. Mm-hmm. And great, do what you enjoy and so forth. But if you've got the aches and pains, you're hitting that plateau, there are other ways to go about it. And one of the misperceptions out there is that you've got to just go harder. Yeah. You got to hit that wall harder. You're not training hard enough. You're not intense enough. You're not tough enough. And that's usually not the case. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. I think we've given the people enough of the meat. I want to get into the dessert. The fun stuff.
It's Halloween. Will you bring some candy?
No, I've had too much. What was nice was my apartment complex. They put candy inside of our stairway cases, and you could have. I was like, oh no, because literally, dude, it was this huge table of candy, and it said, grab a bag and fill up a bag if you want to. And I was like, I'm going to take this whole thing. So. No, I'm good on the candy. But Ironman Florida is this weekend.
It is.
For you and others that are joining.
Yeah, and so when people hear this, it'll be it's already happened.
Yep, it's already happened.
Yeah, we've got several individuals running Monumental this weekend, trying to qualify for Boston. We've got some half marathoners. We've got some shorter distances running. We've got individuals going down to Disney and running that series, the 5K, 10K, and the half marathon.
Oh, is that this weekend?
It's this weekend as well. We've got several of us going down to Ironman Florida.
Yep.
There's a couple of us that this is our second in the last 6 weeks, and so as we talk about recovery and that kind of stuff, being able to do 2 large events, a month and a half apart, I mean, it's just blessed to be able to do those sort of things.
Yeah.
And some of it is a lot of hard work in the training to have a fitness level there. Some of it is really hard work of not doing the training so your body can recover, doing the boring stuff with the flexibility and the strength work to have a body that can sustain those pieces.
Yeah, emphasis on boring.
Yeah, I'm not 26 anymore.
Yeah, me neither.
Me neither.
So what I want to ask from that is, do you have a favorite pre-race meal?
No.
No favorite pre-race meal?
No, because I'm all over the place. I like food.
Yeah, me too.
And so my pre-race routine is that I will have a very nice meal the night before, and usually it's early. And so I get teased a lot. I'm in that AARP age group, and so I'll have an early dinner the night before, at 4 or 5 o'clock, just to get calories in so I get settled and so forth. I really love chicken. I really love seafood. I really love pasta. I really love steak. I love potatoes. I love keep the list going on and on and on. And so when we get down there, the choice would have been made by, I see that one. I see that restaurant. I see this restaurant. I'm looking at reviews. I'm just trying to find something that catches our eye. I don't have a specific meal that I have to have, or otherwise my race isn't going to go well.
Yeah.
It's the timing for me.
Okay. So. Well, good. Well, I like that. I like, coming from the 26-year-old, I do like having my dinner at like the same time you do. So
well, you are getting older. You are getting older.
That's true. That's true. Almost 27. Have you had a favorite one though, or no?
A favorite meal?
Yeah, like one that just stands out from the rest, where you're like, man, that was super good before this race.
Yeah.
Any of them?
No, not really.
Okay.
More of them come from the experience of the venue.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Like I said, they're all about the same time. It's the people that we have dinner with. So there's several races where we'd have a lot of us doing them together, and so share that camaraderie. Those are what stands out more so than the food for me.
Okay.
And that's I may be different than most, and a lot of people really enjoy the food and the type of food, and they get into that space of it. For me, the food is a tool. It's the experience. It's the timing. It's that preparation side of the world.
Okay, I was just wondering, just curious. Pre-race song. Do you have a song or a video that you have to watch before the race, no matter what?
There have been times that I've had. So in recent years, it's the Nike video. I'm drawing a blank on what the words are.
Like the Serena Williams one?
Maybe. It's been used in a lot of different places. I mean, cyclists have used it, swimmers have used it, triathletes have used it, and they've kind of put different pictures together with it. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm missing the actual title of that, but it's a motivational song that Nike put out a number of years ago. And before my first triathlon, happened to find it, and so that became, for a couple of years, I just had to, welcome to the grind. Welcome to the grind. Yep. And so would have to listen to that and get fired up and remember those early mornings, remember that hard training, remember why I'm doing it, and get pushed into those places.
Well, good. Well, because I have mine, so I wondered if you had yours. All right. Well, good. So I have 3 questions that I want to hit you with, just to end here. Would you rather be forced to sing along or dance to every song you hear?
Oh my gosh. Both of those terrify me.
Yep. Sing along?
I would be
answer.
less embarrassed by my singing than my dancing.
Yep. Okay, good. Would you rather lose your sight or lose your memories?
Oh, goodness.
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one.
It is. I would. I value my memories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have the same answer. Would you rather have a personal maid or a personal chef?
I can cook and I hate cleaning, so a maid.
Maid? Okay, well, there you go. All right, well, good. Well, any last message you want to leave the people with before we wrap up here?
Everybody, there's a lot of different ways to accomplish your goals. And if you've been in discomfort, pain, or you've been struggling with plateaus and that sort of thing, I'd love to talk to you about if there's low-hanging fruit that I can suggest to you. Whether you're training with us or not, I mean, those are just good things to maybe chat with one of the members, one of the individuals, and see if they've got some experience, wisdom they can share with you. I'd love to talk to you about those pieces as well. There is not one way to answer those questions, and it takes a lot of work.
Awesome. Cool. Well, just to end here, so the second episode of the podcast, right? So that's exciting.
We're on number 2.
Right. And this is kind of like the first one, because the first one is just an intro. So it's like, whatever. This is where we get into stuff. So, but just to everyone out there, you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts. It's officially out. It's officially out on Spotify. And then if you want to listen and or watch, you can go to our YouTube, the PXP Endurance YouTube channel, and find it on there. And, share this with a fellow runner, right? We talked a lot about running today. If you share it to a friend, share to your Instagram, we'll repost you. Share it to your Facebook, all that stuff. So if you think someone could gain from this podcast, share it. We'd love to spread the word on not being hurt and running, right?
It doesn't have to hurt.
Right. So, and then leave your comments, on anything on the podcast that we post. You can leave your reviews in the comments on Apple. I know on Spotify, same thing. We post the clips on our social media page for PXP Endurance. So leave the comments on there, and please ask questions as well, because we really do want to turn your questions into this podcast. Essentially, and where, I'll feed the questions to Paul when we get them, and have your questions answered, right? So whatever questions you have, please ask them. You can ask them right below in the comments if you want to. If you want to directly message PXP Endurance, we'll see them on there, and then get them answered for you on here. Or they might get answered on social media themselves as well, right?
Right, absolutely.
And then, or you can send them to pxpendurancemedia@gmail.com. You can send them there. But yes, leave your reviews, leave your ratings, and share with a friend. So we hope you enjoy it. And that's all for today.
See you, everybody.